Thanks everyone for attending today. It's been a lot of great presentations so far. Quick shout out back to GummyCube. I feel like I might steal some of their pointers for future reference, especially the emphasis on better App Store optimization. So here's a quick note about me. Worked at a few big brands that you might have heard of, the Knot.com, worked at SailThrough with our email platform, as well as K-Health. And so I actually want to start off with a little bit of a history lesson. So for those of you who don't know, K-Health is a telehealth provider, a telemedicine provider for folks who might struggle to get to see a doctor. So imagine if you're living in an area where maybe the clinics are booked up, or maybe you're living in a city and you're trying to book an appointment with your doctor, but they're all booked out until, say, 2 months from now. And you have a quick question. You might have a health question that you feel like, I don't know if it needs an appointment, but you really kind of want to find out. And so I'd actually like to start off with a quick show of hands for just a moment. How many of you have done a Google search on your medical symptoms in the last 12 months? Just quick show of hands. All right, kind of what I expected. Now, how many of you did a search about your medical symptoms in the App Store? Quick show of hands. Thought so. And so that's one of the reasons why I'm here to talk about web to app user acquisition today, is because knowing your customer profile, understanding what they're thinking as far as where do they go for trusted information, that's incredibly important. And how do you bridge that gap, especially for us at K-Health, how do we bridge that gap between where they are and where we want them to be, which is getting them to understand that their medical condition is okay, or rather, you know what, we can help them with a real doctor's visit and a prescription in a matter of an hour. So just some quick history over here. You can see on the top some of the past events that have led up to where we are today. I think there's one theme that really kind of runs through all of these events, which is privacy. All the way from 1996 into the most recent CPRA going into effect as of the beginning of this year. User privacy is incredibly important. And some of you may have seen the Apple ads talking about privacy on their iPhone. It's not a trivial matter. We at K-Health leverage several techniques to make sure that PHI and PII are in fact secure between masking, encryption, and tokenization to a degree. And of course, on the bottom, we at K-Health were, making strides to incorporate AI as far back as in 2018. So in 2016 and 2017, we actually used AI to process on the order of 3 to 4 million real medical records from several different hospital systems. We tied those back to conditions. We looked at the treatments that led to successful and potentially unsuccessful outcomes. And then we fed that into an AI chatbot that said, let me ask the fewest possible questions so that we could get out of the user's way and instead give them the best kind of information that we could give them, which is real medical information about what they were feeling and whether or not it was a big deal or not. We would move on in 2019 to adding urgent care conditions because we knew that folks wanted treatment for small things such as acne or maybe UTIs. Then moved on in 2020, kind of predictably, to mental health. I mean, there was a small thing that happened in 2020, not sure if anyone realizes it, and we were all pretty stressed out, and so mental health kind of was pretty important during the pandemic. Pediatrics in 2021, primary care also in 2021, late 2021. And so this is basically to say that we've been expanding our offerings very deliberately to try and meet the users where they are, to keep making sure that we could serve them when it was really hard for them to see a doctor. But at the same time, we had to juggle a lot of different priorities and different headwinds that were coming from this overarching privacy concern. I want to show you a few things about our marketing that we had been doing in 2021 and through 2022. You can see here that we've got outdoor billboard advertising and a quick clip of a YouTube video that was pulled from our TV advertisements through several different markets. You'll notice one thing here. We have a strong brand presence. We talk quite a bit about the benefits of health and thinking about that up front, but you'll notice something. Take a quick, deeper look at what's going on with the URLs here. There's actually no attribution on the end. We don't track anything at all about where these campaigns were run, which audiences we were targeting. How would we even know if these were working as opposed to some of the general channels that we were running in other places? So instead, or at least in conjunction, we've been doing a lot of work on the app. We started actually as an app back in 2018. And with the symptom checker, the idea was, how do we help users quickly get to where they need to go? We also, at the same time, started to invest in SEO. Because guess what? As I mentioned before, most folks, they actually, search on Google for what's important to them. And so the idea was to build a bridge. To be able to build a bridge between searching for, hey, I have a pain in my knee, or, what are the best medications for colds, and then getting them to our page, and then ultimately to going through our onboarding, through our AI, and then seeing a doctor. I'm proud to say that at least from the last numbers I'm aware of, we were hitting something like 1.5 million uniques a month, which is not trivial. It takes a really concerted effort from an SEO perspective to really figure out what are users searching for and how do we best serve them. You see an example here of an article with several calls to action and a sticky banner that then leads to the web-based onboarding. The web-based onboarding was actually brought on roughly a year and a half ago, actually. It came live back in March of 2022. And it was a big deal for us because we were able to start moving parts of the app into the web that made sense. The parts of the app that were really valuable to stay in the app, we made a strategic decision to say, you know what, long-term chat, understanding their care plans, understanding where their medication was, that felt like it was the right place in the app for us to be able to re-engage them as opposed to on the web, which felt more ephemeral, kind of like the classic drop-off problem that you might analyze in some of your situations, deciding whether or not you have certain functionality on the web as opposed to certain functionality on the app. And so in this case, we've been seeing really good success, and more importantly, we've been building up our data muscle to actually achieve proper attribution and proper engagement with our remarketing campaigns, understanding how our direct as well as paid efforts are going, and setting us up for the next wave of work as we expand partnerships with different organizations such as hospital networks, such as insurance providers, so that they could also leverage the power of K-Health's AI and our network of virtual clinicians. So in retrospect, because this is a war stories conversation after all, in retrospect, where could we have done better? So this classic Venn diagram from e-consultancy about multi-channel marketing, you can see I've highlighted a few of the areas that we focused on. It's not necessarily that it's the wrong mix that we focused on or the right mix that we focused on, but it's a worthwhile strategic exercise for all of you to think about what makes sense for my customer. Remember, I just pointed out that folks search for their symptoms on Google. It's just what they do. We can't get away from that. And so for all of your apps, where do they start? Do they start looking for entertainment? Are they a game? Do they start looking for an audiobook? And if so, how? Keeping that in mind and understanding where your users are initially thinking about their need is so important and will feed into your overall strategy. We made a snafu on the TV and the outdoor campaigns, as I mentioned before. So I urge you all to make sure that you track. So make sure you segment your campaigns, make sure you know where your users are coming from. And if you don't, not to worry, there's always tomorrow to fix it, promise. We'll just have to enjoy the drinks in the company for today. And from a content perspective, that was a big thing for us as well. We learned the lesson the hard way, where while we did have segment set up throughout our funnel, we had points of failure throughout that funnel. And even the idea of a funnel was something that we felt was very much kind of part and parcel of things, but we weren't necessarily thinking in terms of loops. I'll take a moment to just point out or be a bit more specific about what I mean. So a classic funnel, of course, as all of you know, starts from awareness into conversion. But it doesn't really take into account the fact that healthcare doesn't have to be a single player mode kind of a situation. It could be multiplayer. What if you got creative about how you looped in some of your friends on, hey, this diagnosis actually worked out? Or do you think that this is my diagnosis? What if you could take care of your family in a more natural way through referrals or through family plans to re-engage them in that kind of a loop mechanism? That's what I mean by thinking less in terms of acquiring users in one way and instead acquiring and engaging with them and incentivizing them to work with your brand, frankly, to see whether or not there is something there. So not just loops, but also experimentation. So that's where I think that we kind of let the ball down a little bit. As far as our experimentation goes, our analytics and our attribution at the beginning of 2022 wasn't really quite up to snuff. We were really proud of our AI, but we didn't do enough to treat it with the same priority as the features and the doctor's visits. And there's something there for all of us here as we develop our apps, our platforms, to make sure that we have a really good end-to-end trace, to make sure that everything is working very robustly, from test campaigns and direct ads, from your ASO experimentation, and other campaigns that you might be doing in order to acquire users, to make sure you know exactly where they're coming from and whether or not they're working. And last but not least, this is a point of debate. You're catching me at a vulnerable moment because there are several camps at K-Health. Some feel like, hey, we should keep expanding our offerings. I have found that keeping it more simple or forcing a degree of simplicity for users is the way for us to win. And in this case, we kept it distinct. I mentioned before that we had our symptom checker. We also had urgent care. We also had mental health and primary care. We thought of those things as distinct. I would encourage folks to rethink that for your own situations. Do you have distinct apps? Do you have sidecar apps that feed into a main one? Do you have web properties or widgets that might do something to acquire users but aren't like well connected or well integrated? I'd encourage you to think more strategically and to get a sense of, well, does this all make sense together as a whole picture? Is it a whole picture like that Venn diagram, or is it a bunch of disconnected dots? So that's all I've got for today. Thank you all for having me, and happy health. Check out khealth.com. Thanks all.